Sawa.
Hi.
Welcome again to another mentorship session. I hope you've had a good week so far, and I hope you're grasping something from these sessions and also getting a mentor along the way. So, we've come to another Cyber Shujaa job hunting and mentorship session, and we'll be speaking on AI governance today. And with us is Nimo Kering, who will be taking us through this particular topic. So, Nimo is a legal professional specializing in the intersection of technology and law and is currently serving as a consultant on AI and data privacy. Her expertise is shaped by experience with leading global institutions, including her selection as an AI ethics and governance scholar with the Center of Global Governance, and her current role as an AI safety scholar with the Center of AI Safety. So, just to note, for her selection as an AI ethics and governance scholar, she was one of only five chosen from over 1,000 participants. She also holds an LLM in intellectual property and technology law from the University of Pennsylvania, Curry Law School, and an LLB from Strathmore University. She also has other certifications from Wharton Business School and the Kenya School of Law. She has also worked in Singapore at the Singapore International Arbitration Center and Dentons. Her current research focus is on the liability of AI agents. So she obviously has a lot to tell us about AI and specifically AI governance, something that really resonates with us in the IT field, who will either be developing AI models, working with AI models, protecting data that is interacting in AI environments. So this is just a very relevant topic for us, and it's a pleasure to have Nimo on the call with us to take us through this. So karibu sana Nimo, and welcome to the Cyber Shujaa session.
Thank you very much, Hope, for that introduction. We can just go ahead with sharing of the PowerPoint.
Okay. Just a minute.
So as Hope prepares to share the PowerPoint, thank you very much, guys, for joining in the session. I hope it will be interactive and you learn a thing or two, as I will from the rest of you. I'm hoping to have a super interactive session, so please feel free to drop any questions on the question tab, or just raise your hand. I think Hope or I will be able to see it and then intervene.
Yes, just a minute, I was opening them. Mm-hmm. Yes. So my internet is a bit slow. It's taking a moment to load the presentation area. Yeah, there we go.
No worries. Great. Great. So I wanted this presentation to just be a bit high level. So essentially just exploring that relationship between AI and the consequences when things go wrong, particularly for most of you guys, most of you Cyber Shujaa guys who are developers and some are deployers. So before I jump into...
Muted them. Please let's join with our mics muted.
Yeah, so before I jump to the technicalities and just the legal principles on this, I normally, before this kind of sessions, like to highlight a few real-world cases, use of AI, different industries. As you guys have been seeing, there's been a lot of money being deployed on to these innovations, startups that are AI-centered. Feel free to jump in on any AI innovation that you may think is interesting or different. I try normally read on that and see which are the upcoming innovations in the sector. So there's one called, and I think I've put it on the next slide, Care AI. It's transforming healthcare by supporting care teams 24/7. So it's using intelligent sensors and virtual core solutions to make care more human-centered and 24/7 without now necessarily needing to have nurses and doctors all around. So that was different. Then there's one called Bill Dots as well. This one has recently raised a round of about $45 million, which is quite a lot, to expand its AI-powered forecast tool, predicting construction delays, something that would be so useful in this country. I thought that was also interesting. And then we also have Relay, but this one is more on the accounting. It just automates complex accounting and accelerates financial closes. So just making the accounting process faster. I don't know if anybody wants to share any interesting AI innovation they have come across recently, but if not, we can just move on. No pressure, guys. It's supposed to be very relaxed. Just jump in whenever you can. Okay, so we can go to just a basic introduction.
I think there's someone.
There's
Sorry.
someone? Okay.
Yeah, Enoch
Yes,
has
just
his hands up, then Quincy.
okay, go ahead, guys.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I had the latest AI that is called Hacker GPT.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly used by the hackers or maybe the malicious attackers who want to. There's a way they want to implement and maybe form something that it's something like they try to create a phishing attack with it. It's also another form of AI that it's coming up, maybe in the sphere of cybersecurity.
Okay, that's interesting. That will align very much with what we're discussing on AI liability at this point. Is it in Kenya? Is it based? Where was it? Where is it deployed?
Okay, it hasn't, but I think it's from somewhere around Asia. It's abroad, but it hasn't come to Kenya. It's about to come very soon.
Okay. I think we had somebody else. Just take one more, then I'll continue. Yes.
Okay, let me go first.
Lee, go ahead.
Okay, so I have one that is known as Kali GPT.
Mm-hmm.
So it's coming up as a tool to help pen testers in terms of identifying vulnerabilities in softwares and web applications. So it's an open source solution to penetration testing. Yeah, that's all I had.
Okay, where has it been deployed? Thanks for that.
Okay, so let me check for you.
No problem. We can drop it in the chat.
Okay.
The last one, then we can proceed with the presentation. I think there was somebody who jumped in.
Hi, Nimo.
Hi.
So I was at Absa Bank yesterday, and they've rolled out an AI called Akili AI that's about to help them with the robo advisory, credit scoring, and handling basic customer complaints. It's really, the efficiency was really good. However, there are some questions which are posed to them around AI governance, and it's being utilized across Absa Bank in the entire African continent.
Oh, including Absa here in Nairobi, in Kenya.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting to look at. Thanks for that, guys. So I'll just delve straight away to the presentation. Hope you can start the presentation. I don't know if I can. Yeah, I can see it. Great. So we'll talk about responsible AI governance as well as AI liability. Now, when we're talking about responsible AI governance versus AI governance, responsible AI governance is a subset of AI governance. Now, responsible AI governance means more the designing, developing, deploying, but doing so in a way that adheres and respects human rights and adheres to AI ethics at every stage. That is from development up until deployment. The AI governance, on the other hand, is just the systems and the rules and the processes for the development of AI. So you can look at responsible AI just as a subset of AI governance. What's important with AI governance is that there's a concept of shared responsibility, and this is a fundamental one because there's no single entity that controls the entire AI lifecycle. Yet the consequences of the AI systems will all be felt collectively. So that's why it's important that all actors in a national AI ecosystem, that's from the policymakers to the developers to the end users, must take responsibility for the human and the social impacts of AI. We'll go to AI governance approaches. To understand how we can manage AI, it's helpful to look at the different strategies and models being already implemented and considered across or around the world. The approaches themselves are not mutually exclusive and are often combined to create a comprehensive governance framework. So when I'm setting out these approaches, it doesn't mean that it's one or the other. They normally essentially work all together. The first is the principle-based approach. This one sets the ethical tone on the guiding values of a nation's AI journey. I think a good example is the recently published Kenya's national AI strategy. There's also a draft from Nigeria on pretty much the same. They ideally set out the core principles of fairness, transparency, accountability to guide the ethical development and deployment of AI. Now, we also have the standards-based. That one now moves from the principles to the how-to by turning these principles into measurable technical benchmarks. It involves the use of technical standards from international bodies such as ISO and ensures the AI systems are reliable, safe, and interoperable. And there is liability ideally set out in the event of breach. A good example here would be the EU AI Act, which I believe is the most robust as it promotes the use of the harmonized standards. And so that in that jurisdiction, if a company's AI system does not conform to these standards, it just presumes it's not in compliance with the Act. And if it does, it's considered that it does. So it simplifies the regulatory process. There's the agile and the experimentalist, which I always find quite interesting because the approach comes from the fact that we don't have all the answers yet, but it provides a safe space for learning by doing it. A good example is having regulatory sandboxes where businesses can test innovative AI products in a controlled environment, but under regulatory supervision. A good example is now Rwanda's partnership with WEF to create a center for the fourth industrial revolution to allow the country to pilot governance models for AI and other emerging technologies. I don't think it was purely for AI. Then there's the enabling and facilitating approach, which recognizes that AI governance is just not about rules. It's also about building capacity to innovate responsibly across board. So it focuses on government support for AI development through funding for education, building data, infrastructure, and promoting R&D, that's research and development. A good example is UNESCO's AI readiness tool, which helps member states evaluate their capacity. I don't know if any of you has used that, but before you deploy a tool, you can set it out on the assessment tool, and then it will show you your capacity on infrastructure, skills, and legal frameworks, and then that gives you a good grounding for AI governance. Then there is the adopting the existing laws. A lot of countries take this strategy because it's essentially leveraging what has already been established by other states rather than starting from scratch. So I think countries like Colombia and Argentina have also adopted, say, for example, the existing GDPR-style data protection laws to clarify how they would process personal data of the AI algorithms, as opposed to now starting from scratch on their part. There's also the risk-based. This one is more of a pragmatic approach and concentrates regulatory oversight where potential for harm is greatest. So it's very focused on a particular issue. An example is that the Morocco's Data Protection Authority, which is now developing a risk-based framework for automated decision-making. I think pretty much like what would be Akili AI, as someone mentioned, an AI use case. This one is, I think, very pragmatic because it just goes straight to the point and addresses a particular issue. So a question to you guys, and feel free to answer in the best way you think. It's not an exam, but just wanted to get your thoughts on what you think. If Kenya had to choose only one approach to prioritize its building AI governance framework, say principle, risk, adopting existing laws, regulatory sandboxes, which one do you guys, or which one do you think it should be, and why do you think so? Remember, I'd also mentioned that they all work together, but I'm just asking, which one do you think is the most, would be the most beneficial for Kenya for where it stands now in building its AI governance? Hope you can help me just in case somebody raises their hand.
Okay.
Yes, yes, Victor. Anyone can go ahead. I think Victor was the first.
Victor, we can't hear you, but your mic is unmuted. You can try using the Q&A section to write your answer down. Then we can have Collins and Naomi. So Collins, you can go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much. I think the most approach that we will take as a nation and our country would be the enabling factor, because in as much as we have all these huge giants in the field of AI, we are still lagging behind as a country in terms of research, the infrastructure needed, and most so importantly, the information necessary needed to train the citizens and or the nation about the models and how to use them and take advantage of them. If I cite an example, I can say China, for example, is introducing AI in its syllabus come September this year, while here in Africa, we're still lagging behind in terms of like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if we've developed any model as a continent in Africa, but we are heavily relying on outside models outside the continent in terms of like the West and Asia at large. So yeah, I think the enabling factor would play a key role. Thank you so much.
Yes, Naomi. Thanks, Colin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, the most governance approach that Kenya can adopt, I think, is enabling too, because when it says support through education, infrastructure, and research. In education, we are teaching our young leaders how to use AI and automate different categories in the fields, like even the infrastructure itself. But when you say adapting existing laws, the question becomes, are the existing laws good enough for us now? Yeah, I think I'll go with enabling.
Okay, that's interesting. Yes, Lee?
Okay, my opinion is that Kenya should adopt existing laws because in terms of litigation, we have very few acts and policies managing the use of even technology. So the AI is a new thing to us as we struggle to raise our own models. I'd say that we should adapt existing laws, like from countries that are ahead of us, so that we can have a framework on which we should build upon and adopt as ourselves here in Kenya. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, those are interesting. Seems a lot of you guys are on enabling. I have a different opinion, although this, of course, very arguable. I generally do not feel that Kenya has the same enforcement capacity as, say, the EU or the US. So I think focusing on risks makes regulation more practical and strategic. That's just my opinion on the risk-based approach. So just that we can identify niche areas that we need to deal with, so much like what Morocco has done, and then center the rules on it. Very arguable, guys. It's just normally an open discussion, and yeah, I think everybody has ideally a different approach. I think Quincy has something to say.
So I do agree on one thing. We can't check the risk-based approach currently because okay, where I'm working right now allows me the privilege of discussing this with legislators. And currently we are discussing the whole adapting of existing laws because also in terms of enabling laws, we have a bad reputation for always not following or playing nice when it comes to rules or treaties that are not binding in nature. That's why we have a lot of treaties which we sign, but when it comes to now ratifying them and now wanting to make them part and parcel of us, we fail miserably. And you can look at that from the CET, Common External Tariff angle. So when it comes to AI, the first two mostly will work because that's the conversation which you're having right now.
Okay, that's interesting. So from what you're saying, you're focusing on adopting laws or just avoiding risk-based altogether?
Yes, adapting laws is kind of easy right now.
Okay.
Because so far, I think I've identified close to 7 legislative pieces which will need amendment. Trouble is, if we don't have the right people who have the right information within these public participation forums, then whatever the legislator is going to adopt might be too radical and might actually lead to a more, can I say, Chinese-based, where it's now state-controlled compared to now having like even a risk-based or a liberal approach to AI governance.
Okay, get that. Yes, Rachel.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm more of for adopting already used laws in other places, mostly for because of like the different jurisdictions. And when you are creating, then you have like a harmonized approach to work into it. Not that you are creating in Kenya, but then you have limitations of using it elsewhere because maybe the laws you have here are conflicting laws in some other parts. Then to sell your product in those other regions, you again have to re-engineer. But when you like adopt or use like a unified system, I know there's no unified system yet, but then a system very similar to one that it's being used in another part of the world, it's easier to collaborate and to share your work.
Okay. I'll give Anderson, then Collins can close before we move on.
Right. Thank you for that. So I am more for the adapting existing laws and not so much about the risk-based, because I think for the risk-based, we haven't quite have defined what risk levels are. So I think it's until something wrong happens, then that's when we realize probably this was a much higher stake. So right now, given that, we don't have very well defined levels, we can say the risk levels. So I would say we should not just reinvent the wheel, we should just adopt what has been tried and tested in other countries. And like the example you gave with the Colombia, it's where they have certain, protections, data protections. And because here in Kenya, we have data protection laws. So we should just go through that route and not quite reinvent the wheel in that area.
Anderson, just a follow-up question. What parameters would you use in terms of selecting the states or the countries which we should adopt these laws from?
I would say, first of all, we should just go with the standard that is widely used worldwide. So we have like the EU, they have their own laws in that area. We also have in the US the same way. So we should sort of like benchmark with them and see what we can adopt in our own systems here in Kenya, because of course we have very unique systems here. So kind of examine that and see how we can adopt from that, because those have been tried and tested. Most of the cases they've already gone through, they've already sort of defined laws around that area. But here in Kenya, if we start, defining the risk levels, yet we haven't had systems that have been tried and tested over time, then I think that might be a little bit problematic in the long run.
But Collins, we will wrap up with you so that we can move on. Then we'll just come back to this at the very end.
Okay, thank you so much. Mine is just to counter the risk-based approach by backing off my enabling approach by saying that when it comes to regulating AI, many African countries are looking to frameworks from the EU, US, or China. In your view, is adopting or adapting existing laws from other continents a good fit for Africa? Or do we need our own uniquely African approach to AI governance, one that reflects our socio-economic and infrastructural realities? Given, for example, if you ask me in Africa, I would argue that our biggest issue when it comes to AI is we don't have the necessary infrastructure, mostly being the electricity to run or rather build massive data centers that consume the massive amounts of power to train AI models. You know, for example, I was looking at Microsoft. It says that they have so much data centers that they even cool their data centers under the ocean. In Africa, we struggle with even electric connectivity in some remote part of the place. So is it really a governance issue in adopting that risk-based model? Because I think it's all to do with governance. You know,
that's a good point, Collins, and it's the reason I was asking Anderson what parameters would be using that, because even within Africa itself, we have very different, economies and cultural backgrounds. We're not the same as much as we're like people like plastering us all together as one. So yeah, you're right, Collins, to that extent. As I said, it's always causes a lot of arguments amongst people working on this. I'm happy. I'm very great points that you guys have raised. We can keep talking about that after this. So I'll move on now to the connecting governance to liability. So we get a bit into the legal side here. In connecting now these two themes, that is governance and liability, showing how solid governance framework is essential, showing how a solid governance framework is essential prerequisite for a fair and effective liability regime. So governance sets the rules of the road, while liability will determine what happens in the event, say, a driver breaks those rules and causes an accident. If I was to put out the statement in one sentence, what I'm basically asking is, if an AI system causes harm, who should be responsible and how do we prove it? One, governance without liability is just suggestions, but then liability without governance is arbitrary and will end up being unpredictable. So a good governance framework must encompass both, especially the specific duties and standards of care that an AI developer or anybody across the life cycle must follow. And then when harm occurs, these governance defined standards become the benchmark for assessing liability. The question we'll be asking is, did the developer conduct a proper risk assessment as required? Was the system transparent in its decision making, and how did it arrive at its decision? And then the answers to these questions defined by the governance framework will now eventually determine legal responsibility. The idea here is to push for proactive governance because it acts as both a shield and a guide. It will guide developers towards creating safer, more ethical, and shield it in liability in cases by demonstrating that a company or individuals within the AI life cycle acted responsibly and adhered to the established best practices and legal requirements. So this is the main question for today. Let me see if it's visible. Yes. The question is quite practical of how I imagine a legal situation would occur. A Nairobi-based startup, Just Hire AI, creates a recruitment algorithm to help companies screen job applicants. Huduma Bank, a large financial institution, uses that tool to shortlist candidates. Juma, who is a qualified applicant, is rejected without explanation. Then she later finds that AI consistently filtered out applicants from certain counties, or let's say from certain areas in Kenya. The developers say that they only built the tool. They don't know about how it got into the filtering out of Juma. Huduma Bank says, we got the tool from the developers and the system made the decisions, and we got it from Just Hire based on the fact that we trusted it and we thought that they had developed it in a way that would not cause harm. Now, the AI won't be able to explain how or why it made the decision. In traditional liability law, we'd ask who has the duty of care, and can you assign the fault without clear intent or explainability? So these are the kind of questions that would increasingly need an answer, and where traditional tort or contract law or product liability may fail short. So my question to you is, in this kind of circumstance, who would you attribute the blame to, and how would you go about what's the thought process in attributing this liability? Yes, Collins, can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I would hold Just Hire AI accountable. Reason being, if they create an algorithm, then they are, can I say, obligated to pilot that algorithm for, what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? For a trial phase. They could launch like a beta trial in a simulated environment and have a select few group of individuals use the AI to apply for a certain role. A certain role is created in the simulated environment. They apply for the role, and then they can see from that role, was the AI efficient in regards to what it was trained to do in filtering out the best candidate possible for the relevant job. If not, then they can fix the illegalities, or rather the shortcomings of the AI in regards to that error that it's found. So for this case now, if for Juma, if he's rejected without explanation, having been qualified, then it points out to the startup that there has to be a shortcoming on their algorithm, on either how it was trained and or the data it was trained on. It could be that maybe there's a certain demographic of individuals and or qualifications in regards to that job description that it wasn't fed on correctly, that led to it being having to disqualify qualified candidates. Thank you. That's my take.
Thanks, Colin. Sami, then Francis, then Anderson, and can close.
Okay, first let me say thank you for the session. It's going well. So my input, I will also put it on Just Hire, based on two concepts. The first one is based on responsible. They should have followed the responsible data practices. In that, as the way Collins has said, the data that the AI was trained on, they should have either fed it through tried it on better, how to have it, ensure that it has better filters so that doesn't have bias. That's one basis that I would hold them accountable. The other one is they should have and before the go live date of the AI itself, before they take it to market, they should have like an internal audit process. In that, they should check the input output check. They should have like something like input output checkpoints that would have enabled them to screen the app itself, so that they can know the robustness of the transparency of the process. Are the inputs that they are putting, maybe the CVs, and the output, which are the shortlisted candidates, how is that process? Is the AI actually doing what they intended to do? So in those two, using those two bases, I will put just AI on the pedestal for us to judge them on that case.
Sami, before you finish, what do you think, or don't you think that Huduma Bank has the primary duty to ensure its recruitment process was lawful and non-discriminatory as the employer?
Also on that part, also on Huduma part, they should have actually also done their due diligence before any system. They should have done their third-party internal audits before they actually use the system itself. But on to the part that they actually did that, coming from what you just said, I think we should actually hold both parties accountable. But I think the root cause would by using Huduma Bank, going facing them to taking them to court, wouldn't be doing right. In that, the root cause, which is just higher, which will be used by other clients, which let alone Huduma Bank, they will still be going on with business, but actually will actually go into the symptoms, which is Huduma Bank, but just higher will still be doing business. So the root cause wouldn't be actually, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a word. So we wouldn't have solved the root cause of the problem, which is just not doing their due diligence, doing the internal audit before they actually go to market. During maybe the UAT, they would have been able to maybe spot the problems and actually before going to market. That's my take.
Okay, thanks, Sami. Francis, then Anderson, we wind up on this. No, I can hear you, Francis. Okay, maybe Anderson, you can go first.
All right, sure. I think that you can have very good developers, but end up having a system, having them develop a system that actually fails at the very end. I think laying out the expectations beforehand is very, very important before building out any model. So in this case, I would hold Huduma Bank responsible for this, because I should be able to have a reason as to why I select certain candidates and not select others. Whether or not I share that with the candidate is up to me, but I should have that reason. Sometimes you might reject a candidate and not explain why clearly why you've rejected them. Maybe their credentials were lacking or something of the sort. But I should be able to rank all the candidates and be able to tell as to why some were picked, some were highly ranked, and others were not. So that expectation should have been laid out before by Huduma Bank before going to development by the developers. So I would say this blame, I would hold it more on Huduma Bank for that reason.
Okay, Anderson. Victor? Victor, Francis, any of you can...
Yes, as for me,
okay,
in
yes,
summary,
mm-hmm.
a high liability challenge in this context of Huduma Banks highlights the gap between rapid technological advancement and legal preparedness. And therefore, AI system became more integrated into critical sectors such as bank and transport, healthcare. We need to develop adaptive liability regimes to protect individuals from harm, build public trust in AI technologies, so that we can come with an effective liability framework to balance innovation and accountability, ensuring that no one is above the law and even the algorithms that we are developing. That's my take.
Thank you, Shadrach. I think we can, Francis, Victor, I've just seen your hands up for a while, but I'm not able to. Yeah, is that Kirui? You can.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for this kind of a question. I think this is something that we actually need to put into consideration with a high thought on how can we embrace AI. And as AI come in, I think it fits into the application algorithm in an aspect that there is a whole process when you are coming up with the tool, especially when you are trying to see whether this tool or this AI, if it is an agent kind of, you ask yourself, and you take it to a sandbox if that is possible, and run a serious test, especially now, like the people who are giving it out to the bank, they should have asked the bank who are the intended or the targeted audience, so that if possible, they can run their algorithm in reference to all the attributes and all the objects that need to be queried. And I would say this one, it actually goes straight to the vendor. That is where the problem starts from, because the bank come in and see a solution, and again, the person who is supposed to be advising is the one who is selling it to the bank. So they should have considered asking the bank those kind of points, like who are the expected person, what do you need to this AI tool to do, and run it on a sandbox to understand whether it will pick or not pick. Because as the question we just said clearly, that it is targeting people from a specific county. So it should be made clear and should be tested on a control environment to see that if it accepts and runs through all the counties and picks the applicants as a test before releasing it out to the bank. So more so, I will also blame the person who is supposed to be advising the bank in this case to actually be the one taking the responsibility, because they should have also requested whether the whole thing has been run through a test to see whether it will pick those objects to a point that it does not mess up.
Thanks for that. I hope you guys are seeing, or you're starting to see how a lot of these responses reflect on the governance issues that we have just discussed. And this makes a good segue to what the challenges in assigning liability are. You'll see from your responses, there's a clear black box problem. And this normally comes around when AI models are so complex that even their developers, their creators cannot fully explain the reasoning behind a specific output, in this case, the discrimination element. So I guess this also makes it incredibly difficult, as most of you have pointed to, set out where was that error that led to the harm, and the error is who caused that error. Was it the developer? Was it the bank? Then there's also the element of the fusion of responsibility. You have, in a typical AI cycle, you have the data providers, the model developers, operators, and eventually the end users. If just hire shows bias, who is legally at fault? This complex web of actors makes it very hard to attribute the blame to a single entity. And then there's also the element of proving causation, which is the more legal side. A plaintiff, in this case Juma, must prove that the AI system's specific failure directly caused their harm. Given the black box nature and the many actors involved, drawing the causal link would be a major hurdle when using this traditional AI liability AI elements. Now, on the theories of liability AI-induced harm, I'll quickly go through other legal theories that would perhaps, or at least that are being tested right now, both in theory and as part of a lot of scholarly work. There's discussions on product liability. Product liability is essentially legal responsibility of manufacturers, distributors, sellers to compensate consumers in the event of an injury or damage that has been caused by a defective product. So in this case, we'd be asking ourselves, is an AI system classified as a product? A plaintiff would have to bring a claim based on any of these three types of defects. Could be a manufacturing defect, which is specifically for the fact that the product deviated from the intended design. There's an element of the design defect, which is most probable in AI-related claims. That is, the product intended design in itself was unreasonably dangerous. There's also the tort negligence claims against the AI actors. The AI actors could be anybody here on the AI lifecycle. And the negligence claim would assert that a party failed to exercise a reasonable standard of care, causing harm. Again, this could have been either the bank or just hire, but the plaintiff would have to prove that there was a duty of care on the part of either the AI developers or deployers, there has been a breach of duty of that care and the causation and damages element as well. That is, Juma must prove that the defendant's breach was the direct proximate cause of their injury. That is, the algorithm failing or its failure is what caused harm or injury to them. There's also a strict liability element for high-risk AI. There is discussions on strict liability as a legal doctrine that essentially holds a party responsible whether they knew or whether they were negligent or not. That would be very specific high-risk AI. Just to try and sum it up, there are emerging legal and regulatory solutions. I find some of this to be quite interesting, and I would be happy to hear if you think there are other solutions as well. There's been the element of shifting the burden of proof. That is, the EU's proposed AI liability directive introduced a presumption of causality. So if a user can show that the AI operator was at fault for failing to comply with a rule, as I've said, I remember the standard aspect of in the AI governance section, then the AI's output is reasonably linked to the harm suffered. The court will presume that the shifting of the burden to the they will shift the burden to the operator to prove otherwise. So now the bank, assuming it's the bank who is liable, would have to show that they did not fail in complying with the rule. So that's the shifting of the burden of proof. Then there's the strict versus fault-based liability. Strict liability is what we've just discussed, but there's also a global debate on the fault-based liability, which requires proving somebody was negligent. Strict liability measure is normally often quite high and should, I guess, be used when there's proposed high-risk AI. Then there's the element of mandatory insurance. I think this is interesting because it's a potential requirement for, there could be a potential requirement for operators of high-risk AI systems to hold out mandatory liability insurance, pretty much like how all drivers have, and cars have to have when you're driving, when you're operating a vehicle. So this ensures that the victims have a clear path to compensation, even if the operator is a small company without deep pockets. So in this case, Just Hire would be required to have mandatory insurance in the event that they are found culpable of the harm. Let's say it was discrimination against Juma. So to ensure that he or she is sufficiently compensated in the event that they are presumed to be liable. So in conclusion, this was very much a high level. I was intending for there to be, I guess, to put in more questions in your heads as to the direction in which AI liability is going. There's lots of material which I'm happy to include in the PowerPoint as some form of sources, and you can read more. There's also other elements of criminal liability with AI use, which I've not included today on account of time. But I think we can all be clear that the legal and regulatory landscape for AI, and particularly AI liability, is evolving rapidly. Right now, I think it's gone to AI agents, which is a whole other ballgame. So as the existing frameworks are being tested and new approaches are being developed, it's important that we navigate by understanding these emerging trends and strategic best practices. That's it for me. Thank you very much. Happy to have a discussion or take questions. I'll just drop my email or my LinkedIn. Happy to connect. Yes, as we go forward. Let me just drop that. Yes, at Collins.
Miss Nimo Kering, hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you so much for this session. As we wind up, reflecting on Tony Elumelu's remarks at the recent Qatar Economic Forum, where he emphasized that Africa cannot afford to miss out on the AI revolution as it did with the industrial and digital revolutions. I'd like to hear your perspective. What does the future of AI in Africa look like to you from where you see it, given the continent's challenges, especially around infrastructure like reliable electricity and the dominance of global tech giants building power-intensive data centers? How can Africa carve out its own path in AI innovation and development? And then to what legal, regulatory and policy foundations do we need to put in place to ensure that Africa is not just a passive consumer of AI, but an active creator and driver of ethical, inclusive AI solutions? Thank you so much.
Great. I can take another one, then I probably answer them at the same time. Andrew, yeah.
Yes, my question is, seeing as how AI has developed rapidly over the few years it's been, and the sudden, like, really quick reliance on AI assistance by just normal consumers. As using your view as a professional in this field, when do you think it would start becoming a problem where people will start being over reliant on AI?
Okay. I can take a third one. Anderson. Oh, no. Enoch first then.
Kering.
Yes.
Okay, now with the involvement of and the rapid growth of AI across various sectors or the levels of economy. Okay, now within the legal profession or within the legal perspective. Okay, how is it? Okay, yesterday I was watching a certain documentary concerning how sometimes it can be used. Let's say when someone tries to go and present a case in the courtroom, and okay, maybe when he wants to make an accusation against someone, okay, how do you see it? If let's say it can be the way it can be misused, it can be used maybe to prompt something, make it legitimate and real, making it as a real evidence against against someone. Okay, which is not the real case. Maybe that person has been accused falsely, but sometimes how someone can use the AI to prompt a certain evidence to an extent. Maybe when the judge comes with this final judgment, he can come until it comes to a finding that maybe a certain person is guilty, which is not, but the evidence that has been adduced before the courtroom, it appears to be real, but it's actually a false accusation.
And just to be clear, what is AI? Where is the harm in what AI is doing that you're trying to ask? Is it that they have manipulated evidence, or
something like that? It can be used to interfere with the evidence, or maybe make an allegation. It can also make the allegation to be true. Maybe when you are trying, okay, let's say between the plaintiff and the defendant, it can also be used maybe as an accusation against the defendant. Okay. Yeah,
okay,
it can be.
I think I understand what you're saying.
You understand? Yeah,
I think I'm trying to understand what you're saying. To answer that, I'll start with Enoch's question. I think the rules of evidence and the rules and procedures of evidence in the Kenyan courts would not change on account of AI. The veracity in how we adduce evidence and how the evidence is scrutinized would not be affected by AI, at least not in the court process. I'm not sure I understand what you mean outside of it in terms of manipulation. Even say, for example, when you have to produce a video recording in court as evidence, there is certain rules. We have to provide certification for that, for the authentication of that video. So I see AI as a tool as opposed to it just being a whole, it's not a law in itself. It's not, I don't see how it would affect our court processes when it comes to matters of evidence. That's what I'd respond, Enoch. But I'm happy to chat about that because I'm not very sure I understood the full context of the question. with respect to
Okay.
the future, with respect to the future of AI in Africa, it's quite a difficult question, I must say. And every day I feel like I would have a different answer to that. I think the future is essentially bright, to be honest. The only issue that I personally would have is the question of whether governments would prioritize the development of AI on account of the fact that there are, and I think one of you mentioned this, the infrastructure is not necessarily of only technology, but just infrastructure in general might be is pretty far off. Will the government want to, and just everybody maybe in the AI life cycle, but particularly the governments, would they want to focus on AI and boosting AI when they still are substantial amount of people who do not have access to food, to good roads? My fear sometimes is that there would be a change of priority and we can end up forgetting the basics. Yes, AI is essentially also becoming a basic, but I'm not very confident. I'm not very confident that a lot of governments would want to prioritize AI in a true sense when there's other needs, which are, of course, food, shelter, which are very basic in themselves. So those are normally my two contrasting opinions on that. Then with I think you mentioned legal regulations. I think, as you probably know, the legal sector is is quite difficult to penetrate on many things. I don't think AI would be an exception of it, but I'm happy to see that we are moving in the direction where a lot of also lawyers, a lot of I guess judges as well are taking it up. Taking AI up in both courts and both their practice and also just in scholarly work. I'm seeing more lawyers in this space, and particularly young lawyers. So I think there's a good future for lawyers in that sense. And then, good question of the problem of generative AI and overuse. There's this case study that I took, rather I was studying on, and it shows that there's a time some medical AI tool was used, was rather being deployed in a hospital, and it ended up that a lot of doctors stopped truly treating their patients. They just started putting in the symptoms, and then they would just give the what do you call it, like the diagnosis based on what that tool had mentioned. So essentially they kind of like lost their practice, or they became lazy, pretty much with what I think we're seeing sometimes with generative AI and ChatGPT. Everything is ChatGPT. It becomes people's personal assistant. I think it's still a fantastic tool, but then the overuse of it is making people extremely lazy, or rather we're not using our minds as ideally we should. So of course that's a very major risk. But I think that those who I want to say, like, those who know how to use these things will really thrive. And yeah, I see it as an important tool in various sectors, and I would encourage you to keep looking into the different use cases. And I'm sure you guys have seen how much money is being deployed in the sector. So I hope in Africa, in Kenya, we don't miss out on that, regardless of where the funds are coming from. Thank you, guys. I'm seeing that it's 8. I am not able to put in my details, but I don't know if I can put it in the Q&A and you can just get it from there.
Yeah, sure.
Otherwise, thank you. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed. I've written notes as well. And yeah, appreciate you guys joining. I hope you've learned a thing or two.
We definitely have. Thank you so much, Nimo. Just someone, Kipchirchir, made a comment on the Q&A, and he was saying, as the DevOps grew from combining development and operation, it's now a culture. AI should be integrated as a culture and not as a solo thing. Not just let it be. So the same way DevOps is a culture now, AI should also grow as a culture too.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going through the Q&A. Okay, I've seen you've given out your details. Thank you for that. So thank you so much for the session, for the extensive view, and also just bringing this home in a way that is understandable to us and also very relatable. Before I bring the session to a close, parting shots. What are your parting shots from your end?
From my end or from their end?
From your end.
I think I already given mine. I think what I would say is that there are a lot of opportunities to learn AI governance, AI safety, and matters of AI. There are lots of scholarships being deployed. I've been a beneficiary of some of them, and I would like to encourage a lot of you to look out for such opportunities. That way, we are involved on a global level. These scholarships range from Africa, EU, the US, Asia as well. So, I mean, I try to share as much as I can when I do get them, and I just try to be on the lookout for them. I think they give you another perspective of AI, and sometimes it can show you how behind we might be, but we do have the opportunity to catch on. So, I guess that would be my parting shot. Let's partake in getting these opportunities for ourselves to also learn through, even if courses, short courses, certifications. There are a number of them, and I'm happy to share, privately or when you reach out.
Okay. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the session, and sincerely just taking us through AI governance. And we look forward. I always encourage the students, whenever there's a chance to reach out and a speaker is willing to be reached out to, feel free to reach out respectfully through the channels that have been provided. And also go ahead and take the next step, learn past this session. Get a mentor if you can, and if the person is willing to mentor. So thank you so much, Nimo, for just doing this session and also jumping on as a mentor tonight. We truly appreciate as the Cyber Shujaa community.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good evening to everyone who's participated. Thank you so much for an interactive session, and have a lovely week. See you next Thursday. Bye.
Same to
Bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Shukran,
Bye.
shukran.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.